The first time I saw it, Detroit was buried under freezing rain. The city looked half asleep beneath the storm, streetlights glowing weak through fog, abandoned brick buildings sweating water down their walls, the kind of night where every sound feels farther away than it should. I was walking home alone after midnight, not because I wanted to, because my car had broken down 3 blocks earlier, and in that part of city, waiting around felt worse than walking. The streets were almost empty, just distant traffic, flickering neon, wind pushing garbage along the sidewalks. Then I heard something move beside me, not footsteps, scraping, like claws dragging lightly across brick. I stopped near the mouth of a narrow alley and listened. At first, I saw nothing except darkness and rainwater running down dumpsters. Then 2 small eyes opened inside the shadows, red, not glowing like headlights or reflections, wet, alive, watching me. I remember laughing nervously under my breath, convincing myself it was just some stray animal hiding from the rain. But then it stepped forward, and I realized immediately that no animal should have looked like that. It was small, maybe the size of a child, but twisted in proportions that felt deeply wrong. Thin arms hanging too long, a hunched body, skin dark and slick from rain, and a face that looked almost human until your eyes stayed on it too long. That's when the smell hit me. Rotting water, like something pulled from the river after being buried beneath it for years. The thing tilted its head slowly, studying me, and then it smiled, not wide, not dramatic, just enough for me to understand I was being recognized by something that already knew exactly what I was. That was the first night I saw the Nain Rouge, and I didn't know yet that in Detroit, seeing it never just a sighting. It's a warning. I didn't sleep after that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that thing standing in the alley beneath the rain, staring at me like it had been expecting me to walk past. And the smile, that small, knowing smile, stayed with me worse than anything else. The next morning, I tried convincing myself it was exhaustion, stress, some diseased animal twisted by darkness and bad lighting. But deep down, I already knew I was lying to myself, because I hadn't just seen something strange, I had felt recognized by it. That feeling followed me all day, so I started searching old forums, local stories, Detroit history archives, anything connected to small red creatures or urban legends near the riverfront. At first, most of it sounded ridiculous. People joked about it online like it was some city mascot. There were festivals, cartoons, bar stories, the kind of thing cities do when they want to turn fear into tradition. But buried under all that humor, the old stories were different, much older. French settlers in the early 1700s wrote about a creature they called the Nain Rouge, the Red Dwarf. A small red-faced thing seen before disasters, riots, fires, economic collapse, even death itself. Every major tragedy in Detroit seems to drag its name back into the light again, and according to the stories, seeing it was never random. It meant something terrible was approaching. That's when my stomach started tightening, because the thing I saw in the alley wasn't folklore anymore. It matched the descriptions too closely. The hunched body, the long arms, the eyes, even the smell of river not appeared in some of the oldest accounts. I remember sitting there in my apartment, staring at my laptop while rain tapped slowly against the windows. And that's when I noticed something that made the room suddenly feel colder. Outside my building, across the street beneath a flickering lamp, something small was standing perfectly still in the rain, watching my window, watching me. And even from that distance, I could see the eyes. I froze at the window. The figure across the street didn't move. Rain poured over it in silver streaks beneath the street lamp, but the thing itself remained perfectly still, like it wasn't part of the weather around it. And the longer I stared, the less human it looked. Its proportions kept slipping the moment my eyes tried to settle on them. Too small 1 second, too tall the next. Arms hanging lower than they should, head tilted at an angle that felt almost curious. Then the streetlight above it flickered, once, twice, gone. For a second, the entire street disappeared into darkness. When the light came back on, the thing was closer, not walking, not approaching, just suddenly standing nearer than before. My heart nearly stopped. I stumbled backward from the window so fast I knocked my chair onto the floor. I remember standing there in my apartment, chest tightening, trying to convince myself there had to be an explanation. But fear has a strange relationship with truth. Sometimes your body understands something long before your mind is willing to. I didn't look outside again that night. I couldn't. Instead, I kept reading. The deeper I went into the Detroit's history, the worse the stories became. The Nain Rouge wasn't just considered bad luck. People believed it appeared before catastrophe, before the Battle of Bloody Run, before riots, before fires, before collapse. Some accounts even claimed prominent figures saw it shortly before violent deaths. And the strangest part, most witnesses described the same feeling after encountering it. Not that it was hunting them, but that it had noticed them, as if being seen by the creature placed you inside some unfolding pattern you couldn't step back out of. Around 3 a.m., the power in my apartment suddenly went out. Everything. No lights, no humming appliances, no city glow leaking beneath the curtains, just darkness. Then came the sound, soft scraping, from the hallway outside my door, slow, deliberate, like claws dragging gently across old apartment carpet. I held my breath. The scraping stopped directly outside my apartment, and then 3 quiet knocks hit the door. The knocks were soft. That's what terrified me most. Not violent, not desperate, patient. Like whatever stood outside already knew I was there and had no reason to force its way in. I stayed frozen in the dark beside my kitchen counter, barely breathing, staring toward the front door while the apartment around me sat completely dead without power. Then came the smell again. That same wet, rotten river smell drifting slowly beneath the door frame. My stomach turned instantly. The scraping started once more, slow claws dragging lightly across the hallway floor outside, pacing back and forth like something deciding how close it wanted to come. I grabbed the flashlight from my drawer with shaking hands, but I didn't turn it on. Some instinct deep inside me kept screaming the same warning over and over. Don't let it know exactly where you are. Then the pacing stopped. Silence. A full minute passed without movement, and somehow that silence felt worse than the sounds, because silence leaves room for imagination to become punishment. Finally, unable to stand it more, I stepped closer to the door as carefully as I could. Every floorboard sounded too loud beneath my weight. The flashlight trembled in my grip. I leaned toward the peephole. At first, all I saw was the dim hallway emergency lighting flickering weakly against stained apartment walls. Empty. Then something moved upward into view, slowly, like it had been crouching directly beneath the peephole the entire time. I nearly dropped the flashlight. One red eye stared directly back through the glass, not blinking, not angry, aware. And then, impossibly slow, the thing smiled again. Its mouth stretched too wide this time, revealing narrow teeth that looked almost human in shape but wrong in spacing, like they had been copied from memory instead of nature. I stumbled backward so hard I hit the wall behind me. The flashlight finally switched on accidentally, the beam flashing across the apartment, and instantly the knocking stopped. The smell vanished. The hallway outside went silent again. A few seconds later, the building power suddenly returned. Lights flickered back to life. Appliances hummed. The city outside breathed normally again. But I already knew the truth before I looked through the peephole a second time. Nothing was there anymore. Only wet footprints leading down the hallway, small, thin, and ending abruptly halfway to the stairwell, as if whatever made them had simply disappeared into the air. After that night, the city changed, not physically. Detroit still looked like Detroit. Sirens in the distance, old brick buildings leaning over cracked streets, steam rising from manholes beneath gray skies. But something underneath it all felt disturbed. Like the city itself had become aware of something moving through it again. I started noticing strange things everywhere after the encounter outside my apartment. People standing too long at intersections, staring down empty streets for no reason. Dogs suddenly refusing to walk near certain alleyways. Entire blocks going strangely silent at night, as if sound itself avoided certain places. And every now and then, I'd catch glimpses of something small moving at the edges of crowds, always gone when I turned fully toward it. I stopped sleeping properly after that. Every night I'd wake up around the same time, 3:13 a.m., with the same sensation pressing against me. Not fear, expectation. Like something outside my apartment was waiting for me to notice it again. Then came the news reports. Small things at first. Electrical fires, sudden blackouts, a warehouse collapse near the riverfront. Nothing major individually, but together they formed a pattern that made my stomach tighten every time I saw another headline. Because the old stories said the same thing happened before disaster arrived. The Nain Rouge never caused tragedy directly. It appeared before it, like a living omen walking ahead of catastrophe. One evening, I finally decided to leave the apartment and clear my head. I drove downtown near the old river district, where the French stories about the creature first began centuries ago. Rain covered the streets again. Detroit looked beautiful in that haunted kind of way old American cities sometimes do at night. Neon reflecting in puddles, empty sidewalks glowing beneath traffic lights. I parked near the riverwalk and stepped out alone. That's when I noticed something strange. The people around me kept glancing in the same direction, not openly. Quick looks, nervous looks, toward a narrow side street between two abandoned buildings. I followed their eyes, and standing down at the far end of the alley, beneath a flickering red sign, was the small figure again, still watching. But this time I realized something worse. Other people could see it too, and nobody wanted to acknowledge it out loud. I should have left Detroit after that. That would have been the rational choice. But rational doesn't hold up very long when something keeps showing up in your life without following any of the rules you understand. The next few days felt like the city was reacting to me personally, not in obvious ways, in subtle shifts. Like Detroit was adjusting its attention. Street lights would flicker when I passed beneath them. Radio static would spike only in my car. Strangers would pause mid-conversation when I walked by, as if they had forgotten what they were saying. And always that feeling, the sense that something small and red was somewhere nearby, just outside the frame of whatever I was looking at. I tried telling myself it was paranoia, stress, sleep deprivation, but then I saw something that broke that explanation completely. I was walking near Campus Martius at night, passing through a stretch of downtown where everything was unusually quiet. Even the traffic felt distant. That's when I noticed a group of people gathered near a closed storefront. They weren't talking loudly, they were whispering, looking down. I slowed my steps, and there it was again, the Nain Rouge, standing on the sidewalk like it belonged there, but this time it wasn't isolated. Other people were clearly seeing it too. A woman crossed herself, a man backed away slowly without taking his eyes off it, but nobody approached, nobody spoke its name. It was like the entire crowd had silently agreed that acknowledging it out loud would make it real in a way none of them were ready to accept. And then the thing did something different. It didn't smile. It didn't move toward anyone. It turned its head, slowly, directly toward me, across the street, through the crowd, like it had been waiting for me specifically to arrive. And in that moment, I understood something I wasn't ready for. This wasn't just an omen appearing before disaster, it was beginning to choose who notices it. After it looked at me, I stopped pretending I could walk away from this, not mentally, not physically, not anymore. Because that single moment across the street changed something fundamental about how the city felt. Before that, I could almost convince myself the Nain Rouge was random, an old Detroit omen resurfacing in broken places, appearing where history had already left its scars. But now it wasn't random, it was anchored. I stayed where I was, half hidden in the crowd near Campus Martius, watching people slowly drift away from the storefront where I stood. Nobody ran. That's what still unsettles me when I think back. They just dispersed. Like the human mind has a limit for how long it can stare at something impossible before it decides survival means pretending it isn't there. And then the street got quieter, not empty, just carefully avoided. Like everyone subconsciously agreed not to step into the same invisible radius. The Nain Rouge stayed where it was, still, small, red, but somehow heavier than everything around it. I remember noticing details I hadn't seen before. The way its skin didn't reflect light properly. It absorbed it in uneven patches, like the surface of it didn't belong to a single material. The way its head tilted slightly whenever someone glanced in its direction, even if they weren't looking directly at it. Like it could feel attention the way other things feel heat. I took a step forward without meaning to, just one, and instantly I regretted it. Because the moment I moved, the air changed again, not dramatically, subtly, like the space between me and it had become thinner than it should have been. And it reacted, not fast, not violently, just aware. It turned fully toward me now, no hesitation, no delay, and I felt something I still struggle to explain without sounding insane. A pressure in my thoughts. Not words exactly, more like a recognition forming directly inside my awareness. Not a voice speaking to me, but something noticing that I understood it was there. The crowd around us kept moving slowly, but it felt like they were further away than they should have been. Sound dulled, city noise flattened, even the wind felt like it had stepped back. And then I realized something I didn't want to accept. It wasn't just standing in the city anymore. It was creating a space where the city stopped behaving normally, a pocket of reality where it could remain unchallenged. I backed away, slowly, carefully, and for the first time since I saw it, it didn't follow me. It didn't need to. Because as I turned to leave, I saw something worse happening behind me. People who hadn't noticed it before were now starting to notice it, one by one, like awareness itself was spreading through the crowd. And I understood then what made the Nain Rouge different from everything else I'd ever heard about. It doesn't just appear before disaster, it arrives early enough to make sure someone is left alive to remember it. I didn't go home after that. I couldn't. Not because I was being chased, but because I had crossed into something that no longer felt like it belonged to ordinary distance or safety. The streets of Detroit felt different on the way back, not louder, not darker, just less stable, like reality itself was loosening at the edges. Street lights began flickering in sequences that didn't match electrical failure. One after another, blocks would dim briefly, then return as if nothing had happened. But I noticed something consistent. Every flicker seemed to follow my movement, like the city was reacting to where I had been or where I was about to go. I stopped near the river again, needing air, needing something to feel normal. The water was unusually still. No wind, no ripple, just a black reflective surface stretching under the bright lights. And then I saw it again, not in front of me, not beside me, in the reflection, standing on the opposite bank, small, red, perfectly still. But this time it wasn't alone in how it felt, because as I stared at the reflection, I realized something worse. The water wasn't reflecting the bridge correctly anymore. The angles were off, the depth was wrong, like the river itself had become a separate layer of the world that was no longer syncing properly with the one I was standing in. And in that broken reflection, the Nain Rouge moved, slowly, one step, then another. But when I looked up from the water to the actual riverbank, nothing was there. I turned back to the reflection. It was closer now, too close. And for the first time, I understood what frightened me most about it. It wasn't moving through space like a normal thing. It was moving through versions of reality that didn't perfectly align with each other. That night, I left the river immediately, but as I walked back toward the street lights, I noticed something that made my steps slow without permission. Every reflection I passed, windows, puddles, glass doors, showed it somewhere behind me, never directly, always just out of reach, always watching from the place where reality bends first before it breaks. And I realized then, it doesn't need to follow me in the world I stand in. It only needs to follow me in the parts of the world I don't notice are already distorted. After the river, I stopped trusting reflections. Windows, puddles, mirrors, everything started feeling like it had a second layer hiding beneath it, something I couldn't fully access anymore. But the worst part wasn't what I saw. It was what I started anticipating I would see. That's when I realized the Nain Rouge wasn't just appearing around Detroit. It was organizing its presence around me. I started noticing timing patterns I couldn't ignore. It showed up near me after moments of emotional stress, after moments of decision, after moments where my direction in the city changed, even slightly. It wasn't random, it was responsive, like it was mapping me. One night, I went back to the river district again, trying to prove to myself that I could still choose where this thing happened, where this thing appeared. I sat inside my car for nearly an hour, engine off, watching people pass in the distance. Nothing happened at first. No sightings, no distortions, no presence, just silence. And for the first time in days, I almost believed I had regained control of my reality. Then my phone battery dropped from 74% to 2% in seconds. No warning, no usage spike, just collapse. Immediately after that, every streetlight within view dimmed at the same time, not flickering, not failing individually, synchronized, like something had pressed a quiet switch across the entire block. I stepped out of the car slowly. The air felt heavier again, not colder, not warmer, just occupied. And then I saw it, not far, not hidden, standing directly beneath the street lamp at the end of the block, still watching. But this time I understood something that made my stomach drop deeper than before. It wasn't just appearing when I noticed it. It was appearing when I became most likely to believe it should appear, as if my expectations were shaping its arrival. And the more I tried to understand it, the more predictable I became to it. After that night, I stopped trying to separate the Nain Rouge from Detroit itself, because the city wasn't just hosting it anymore. It was reacting with it. Things escalated in ways I couldn't ignore. Entire sections of downtown would feel off before anything actually happened, like the atmosphere itself was warning me first. Then the sightings became more public, not just me, not just isolated witnesses. People began reporting the same small red figure in different parts of the city at the same time, as if it wasn't limited to a single location anymore. That's when I realized something unsettling. It wasn't moving through Detroit. It was appearing in multiple interpretations of Detroit at once. One night, I followed it deeper into an industrial area near the river. The streets were almost empty except for distant traffic and the low hum of machinery from warehouses still operating through the night. I parked near an old loading dock and waited. For the first time, I didn't feel like it was ahead of me or behind me. I felt like I was inside the same space it was already occupying. Then the environment changed, subtle at first. The sound of distant machinery slowed, not stopped, slowed, like time had thickened. The streetlights flickered in sequence again, but this time in a pattern that felt intentional. And then I saw it, standing on top of a concrete barrier near the water, still, facing the river, not looking at me, not acknowledging me yet. And that was worse, because it meant it didn't need my attention to exist anymore. I stepped out of the car slowly, and for a moment, I thought I heard something behind me, not footsteps, not wind, but this faint sense of other versions of the same moment overlapping, like the city was folding different outcomes into a single point. Then the Nain Rouge turned its head, not quickly, not dramatically, just enough to confirm it knew I was there. And in that instant, I understood something I didn't want to accept. This wasn't just an omen appearing before disaster anymore. It was the city itself learning how to carry it. I used to think the Nain Rouge was something that appeared before disaster, a warning, a signal. a superstition that ride carried like an old wound it didn't want to admit was still open. But by now, I understood that explanation was too small for what I was seeing, because it wasn't before anything anymore, it was inside everything. That night near the river, after it turned toward me, I didn't leave immediately. Something about the moment held me in place, not physically, mentally. Like the decision to move had to pass through something else first before reaching my body. The city around us felt unusually still again, no sirens, no passing traffic. Even the water under the bridge looked wrong, too smooth, like it had forgotten how to behave normally. And then I noticed something I hadn't paid attention to before. The Nain Rouge wasn't just standing in the environment, it was anchoring it. Where it stood, the world felt slightly more coherent, like everything around it was being forced into alignment with its presence. And outside that radius, reality felt less stable, more uncertain. I took a step back, slowly, carefully, and that's when I saw it respond, not by moving toward me, but by expanding its influence slightly, like awareness itself was adjusting shape rather than distance. A street light above flickered once, then stabilized, then another across the street did the same. Not failure, correction. That's the only word my mind kept returning to. Correction. As if the city was being quietly adjusted in real time around it. I finally turned away, not running, not fleeing, just choosing not to stay inside that space any longer. But as I walked back toward my car, I realized something that made my steps slow without permission. The sense of observation didn't fade when I left it behind. It followed the perception of me, not my physical position. Because even with my back turned, I knew it was still there, not behind me in space, but behind me in the way reality itself was now being interpreted. And that was when I understood the truth I had been avoiding since the beginning. The Nain Rouge isn't a visitor to Detroit. It's a condition the city enters, when something in it starts to pay attention to the wrong thing. I didn't go back to that river spot again, not because I was afraid in the usual sense, but because something in me understood that returning won't be revisiting an event. It would be re-entering a condition, and conditions don't reset just because you leave them. Over the following days, Detroit felt quieter around me, but not calmer, like the city had reduced its output, carefully adjusting itself to whatever level of attention I was now part of. I started noticing something I can only describe as continuity errors in reality. Street corners I was certain I had passed would feel slightly rearranged later. People I remembered seeing in one place would appear elsewhere with no sense of transition between the two moments. Even time felt less reliable, like it was smoothing over inconsistencies rather than enforcing order. And always underneath it, that presence, not visible anymore, not standing in alleys or near rivers, but embedded in the feeling that I was being accounted for. One night, I stood on my apartment balcony again, same view, same streets, same distant lights, but the city didn't feel like a place anymore. It felt like a system observing itself. And I realized something I hadn't understood before. The Nain Rouge was never just appearing in Detroit. It was revealing how Detroit reacts when something becomes aware of being watched. I closed my eyes for a moment just to break the pattern, and in that silence behind my thoughts, I felt it one last time, not close, not far, not moving, just existing in the same structure of attention I now shared with it. And the clearest understanding I have ever had came without words, images, or fear. Only certainty. It never leaves. It only stops needing to be seen.